So, as he said, I'm going to tell you a story, and the only kind of story I tell well is a true story. So I'm going to tell you some true tales about my experience being a northerner living in the South. And tonight I'm going to talk about manners. So first let's travel back in time to March 2010. I was living in Michigan then, and I'd lived there most of my life. And it was one of those glorious late winter days when it was warm enough that you could actually walk around outside and it didn't hurt to breathe. And for the first time in months, I was starting to believe that spring wasn't just a bullshit fairy tale that I'd been telling myself, but that it might actually happen. And the sun was shining, so everyone was freak out happy. It was probably 40 degrees out. It's kind of sad, but this was a very good thing. So I was walking my dog to the park, and we're feeling really good, feeling great. And I saw this man approaching us. And of course, this is the moment my dog decides she has to dart across the sidewalk to sniff something. So she cuts this guy off as he's walking. So I tug at her leash, and I'm like, sorry about that. And he walks by and he mutters something. And I assumed he muttered, oh, what a cute dog, because my dog is adorable. She's like a beagle mixed with a Jack Russell, and her butt wiggles when she gets excited. And the weather was nice, so her butt was just wiggling nonstop. But when I actually processed what he'd said, he said, do you walk the dog or does the dog walk you? And it's just that's a perfect example of what I don't miss about living in the North. It's someone just gets in your face and acts like a jerk for no good reason. And honestly, this behavior was so common that, especially in the wintertime, it's kind of odd that I still remember it. But I think it struck me in that moment because my husband Dan and I had just paid our first visit to Nashville. And we were just there for a few days, but it was this blissful vacation because we left behind the filthy remnants of a 2-foot blizzard. And we arrived to 50-degree rain. I was so happy. And people were just so civilized. And no one complained about anything except the weather. They were like, oh man, it's supposed to be springtime. When's this gonna let up? And I was like, what? You're kidding me. I could get used to this. But the best thing about that trip was that for 4 solid days, no one got in my face and acted like a jerk for no good reason. And that was pretty new to me. So when I got back to Michigan, I was chatting with my coworker Wendell, who's from Baton Rouge. And he asked me about my vacation, and I told him, oh, it was great. We stopped at Mammoth Cave along the way. We had amazing fried chicken. People were so nice. Which reminds me, why do you live here? I don't understand. Why would you live in Michigan? Winter sucks and people are rude. And our coworker Joby chimed in. He's like, yeah, man, people in the South are like, how are y'all doing today? People here are just what the fuck do you want? And we're just what's going on? Wendell sort of bristled. He took a deep breath, and he's like, it's more complicated than that. But we weren't listening. We just badgered him in Yankee fashion. We're like, what's wrong with you? Why don't you go back? So at the end of March, my husband Dan spotted a job posting here in Chattanooga. And he got the job, and we moved here in August. So we didn't get out much at first because I thought I was going to melt if I left the house. It's quite hot. But then by about October, we were in exploration mode, kind of checking out the retail, restaurant scene. And we found this small, locally owned pet store, not very far from here, in fact. And when we walked up to the store, this hyperactive schnauzer greeted me by pummeling my legs with its little tiny furry paws, which I loved. And then there were just a couple of guys chilling out at a patio table, and they invited us in. And when I opened the door, the schnauzer barreled through come on guys, check it out. And I was like, is that all right? I just let the dog in the store, and the guy's like, yeah, he owns the place, whatever. So we're oh. So we go inside, and this place is super cute. It was an old-timey general store for animals. And it had all this pet-themed bric-a-brac, and they had a little kitchen where they baked their own homemade biscuits. And there was a sign on the counter that said, is your dog afraid of thunderstorms? Ask us for free advice. So I was just thoroughly charmed by this. And Dan was ready to drop $75 on a dog bed. And I was like, oh man, we're still broke from moving. And he was like, okay, but when I get paid, we have to come back here because I really like this place. So we picked out a couple of pet toys, and we paid. The guy gave us a complimentary bag of dog biscuits. And he asked us to come back soon. We said, sure, definitely. So as we were leaving, I remembered there was a consignment shop a couple doors down that I wanted to go check out. But they only had like a street side entrance, and we'd come into the back of the pet store. So I asked the owner, like, oh, can I get out the front door? And he looked confused. And I said, oh, well, I just want to go to that consignment shop. It would be easier if I went out front. And he sighed in this very like put upon manner. And he said to me, and I couldn't believe it, he's like, okay, I'll let you out the front. But you should know that that consignment shop is owned by Black people, and it's just crushed velvet and sequins over there. You're just gonna walk out empty-handed. And I was like, what? And I looked at Dan, and he just smiled and he said, maybe she likes crushed velvet and sequins. And I was like, yeah, I just wanna go check it out. But the guy was just so insistent. He kept saying, you're just wasting your time. You should go to the thrift store on the North Shore. I was like, okay, whatever. So finally I just said, okay, man, like, I'll just go around the building. And he's like, no, fine, I'll let you out. So we went to the consignment shop. We had a very spirited discussion on the way there. And it was great. It was just like kind of plain clothing, you know, just very affordable, dependable, not like trendy. And there was actually nothing made of crushed velvet or sequins, which was kind of a letdown, honestly. But I got a couple sweaters, and I left with the intention of returning, which was more than I could say for the pet store. So in the following weeks, I'd have similar kind of social interactions where it started off like, pleasant stroll through a grassy meadow. It's all like, how y'all doing today? And then, oh, I stumbled over something, and this person's asking me what church I go to? Like, that's kind of presumptuous. And then, oh shit, I fell off a cliff, and this guy's using the N-word. Like, what the hell just happened? So we went back to Michigan for Christmas that year, and I got together with some friends at a bar, and Wendell, my Baton Rouge buddy, was there. And so was our friend Sarah, and one of the first things she asked me was, are people more polite in Chattanooga? And I said, yes, people are more polite about everything except religion and racism. And Wendell laughed, and he said, I told you so. And I was like, yeah, okay. And I mean, I've met a lot of really excellent people here, for sure. But I do find that this specific kind of like bad manners are sort of endemic to the region. So I don't always feel like I belong here. But I don't feel like I belong in Michigan either. So I'm kind of giving up on the concept of belonging. But I can like try to feel comfortable in my own skin. And I do that by telling an honest story. So thank you for listening.